Thank you. Good evening to everybody. My name is Leah Whiston, and as mentioned before, I'm a very proud mother to a gorgeous little 1-year-old baby, which is my life. And like every other mother I've met, our babies are the most precious gift in our lives, and we would go to the ends of the earth to protect them. And my daughter is the main reason why I'm speaking out very loudly now about the dangers of gender ideology. So I used to go along with the trans women are women thing. I didn't really give it much thought. I didn't really look much deeper than the mantra. But then when I was at the University of Brighton in 2016, I found myself in a seminar around the topic of girldick. Then I saw how the only lesbian bar left in Brighton suddenly had a man pretending to be a woman, calling himself the landlady. And this is the UK's gay capital. So it really then dawned on me that lesbians don't have a single space to go away from men. And this absolutely infuriated me. And the penny started to drop. People around me were going along with the fallacy that humans can change sex, that a woman can have a penis, and that a child could be born in the wrong body. The first time I agreed with J.K. Rowling, I received my first message from friends in the UK calling me a transphobe. After I spoke about females losing our right to female-only spaces, I received more messages from old friends. Of course men shouldn't be in women's spaces, Leah. But trans women aren't men. I've been called homophobic. I've been compared to the homophobes of the 80s and 90s. Been called every name under the sun for this. Other friends have slipped away over time because of my firm position that women and children deserve dignity, privacy and safety in our spaces away from men, no matter how they identify, no ifs or buts. And children should never be put on a path to experimental, hormonal and surgical procedures for being gender non-conforming, whatever that means. I see myself in these children. As a tomboy, I never felt like a girl, I never wanted a baby until my 30s. And as a teenager, the thought of being pregnant repulsed me. I didn't see it in my life. I was bullied relentlessly at secondary school, and I know that if I was born 20 years later, my life would be very different. If I had the chance to make the bullying stop, along with the sheer embarrassment and trauma of female puberty, by taking a medication and receiving instant adoration from a community, I'd have done it in an absolute heartbeat. I might not have breasts today or a womb. I might not have my baby. I might not have ever known the sheer joy of what it means to be a mother. And this is being stolen from our girls. Decisions made in their teenage years, removing the opportunity for them to ever know the wonder of what it means to be a mum. Some friends don't really want to engage with me when I mention that in Queensland, a person can change their documents and be legally recognised as the opposite sex in law. This means any man can gain access to women-only spaces and services such as changing rooms, toilets, hospital wards, prisons, rape crisis centres, breastfeeding groups, sports teams, the list goes on. The situation for women's sex-based rights and children's safeguarding in Australia and New Zealand is very worrying. There are a growing group of women who are alert to the changes being quietly made, but there are many, many people who, although they've heard rumblings around gender ideology, they really have no idea about the legal changes that are happening. Laws that are being changed quietly are stripping away the hard-earned rights of women and children. It's really happening. People just don't seem to believe it. Queensland's Birth, Deaths and Marriages Registration Bill 2022 repeals and replaces the existing Act. One of the key objectives in the bill is to, quote, strengthen the legal recognition of trans and gender diverse people, end quote. In other words, The proposed changes to the bill will allow anyone to falsify their official documentation, sex marker, and therefore be legally recognised as the opposite sex in law. No checks, no medical diagnosis, it's simply a matter of self-declaration, and everybody is forced to just go along with that. I, along with many other women across Queensland, instantly recognised the huge danger that allowing men to identify into our spaces would present to women and children, and we presented submissions to the parliamentary hearing for the proposed changes to the Act. The committee asked for further evidence that women and children are at a greater risk of physical and sexual abuse from men, and that men might use the policy change for nefarious reasons. Rachel Wong, CEO of Women's Forum Australia, and Sal Grover, the founder of female-only app Giggle, are two women who presented the case against amendments to the Births, Deaths and Marriages Bill. The committee argued that they couldn't envisage that predatory men might use the sex self-ID to access women and children's spaces. So, the women immediately put together an extensive list of reams and reams of evidence where this has precisely happened. For example, you've probably heard of Adam Graham, otherwise known as Isla Bryson, the Scottish man who raped two women and changed his gender identity before trial. He was then housed in a women's prison and only moved because of the public outcry from our Scottish sisters. Darren Marrigar was reported to have exposed her penis in a female-only changing room at Wee Spa in Los Angeles. When the women complained, they were called transphobic. He was later arrested and found to be a sex offender. Peter Selby is a man who says he's transgender, convicted paedophile with over 125,000 child sexual abuse images, who was spared jail because the judge said he wouldn't cope in a men's prison. And here in Brisbane, Patia Joseph Bunton is a man who was found in possession of child sexual abuse material of boys aged 5 and 16 years old. He used gender identity as a way of receiving a lesser sentence. The judge believed he had acquired the child abuse images out of curiosity at a time when he was struggling with his transgender and sexual identity. Rachel and Sal's list of evidence is in response to the hearing committee alleging that they couldn't find any evidence of men exploiting sex self-ID. The examples they found are only examples that could be easily found online, so the cases that the government have access to could be significantly higher. In a sane society, one example would be enough to put a stop to this absurdity. The Queensland Attorney-General and Minister for Women is the woman responsible for making these changes. Women have not been consulted. Our comments and evidence have been totally ignored. I personally know of numerous women across Queensland who have been blocked from communicating with Shannon Fentiman, MP, for simply raising concerns for the impact that this will have, and currently having, on women's rights and children's safeguarding. She calls us transphobic for not wanting penises in ours and our children's spaces. She calls us hateful for saying that trans women are men, which they are. A quick search on Pornhub or any other porn website will bring up thousands and thousands of videos of a growing genre of porn of men masturbating in women's spaces. This is a fetish, and it's a fetish that requires the compliance of women. The media in Australia is completely captured by gender ideology and rarely reports on the damage being done by it. Children who pursue social transitioning, like changes of pronouns and name, who inevitably will go on to be pushed down to medicalisation and unnecessary barbaric procedures with extremely dangerous complications, are celebrated and encouraged by Australian media. Girls suffering from mental illness are coerced into procedures that promise they will turn her into a boy and endure irreversible damage like wrong sex hormones, double mastectomy and phalloplasty, which is a procedure where the forearm is skinned, totally skinned. The skin of the forearm is then rolled up and stitched onto her groin to give her something resembling a penis, which of course will never function as a penis. Their previously perfectly healthy genitals butchered beyond repair. And if you even dare question this, you're called a bigot, transphobic, and a TERF. For too long, women have felt compelled to remain silent. When speaking about the reality and truth, like humans can't change sex, the fact that sex is the main factor in the oppression of women and girls worldwide, and the absurdity of transitioning children, women usually face punishment. Online harassment, income loss, social outcasting are all extremely powerful forces at play when getting us to just shut the fuck up, but we won't. I recently phoned the local swimming pool where I take my daughter, and I asked them if when sex self-ID comes into effect, will they be able to guarantee no men in our female spaces? They couldn't. I grew up with the right to privacy and safety in my spaces without the worry of seeing men in them. And if I did, the social expectation would have been to tell him to get the fuck out, with the support from the other women in that space. The rights I took for granted are slipping away. Now, we're called all sorts of names for saying men can never be women, or questioning the insane ideology. And this is a whole new world for our daughters. I, along with many other concerned women, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, was one of the organisers of Kellie-Jay Keens' Standing for Women tour of Australia. We hoped this tour would start conversations across this part of the world where the media has so far been totally silent, but we didn't quite expect the level of government collusion that occurred, designed to frighten and intimidate us. It was completely surreal to see so-called Nazis ushered in to appear like they were somehow part of the event in Melbourne. The people attending and organising the Let Women Speak events were continuously smeared by the Australian government and media as literal Nazis. We watched in disgust when Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews lifted the pride flag above Parliament just days after trans rights activists held violent attacks on women for daring to speak in public about our rights. It was unbelievable to witness the level of violence and aggression from men aimed at the brave women who came to speak and support. We watched in horror as the New Zealand event descended into chaos before it even began, as Kellie-Jay Keens and others were physically assaulted. A 70-year-old woman was repeatedly punched in the face by a man who cracked her skull, all while the New Zealand police stood by and did nothing to protect them. Shannon Fentiman and Anastasia Palaszczuk proposed tougher hate crimes and serious vilification laws for Queensland. They say, quote, "We have already taken steps to work towards introducing new hate laws to make it a criminal offence to display hate symbols to evoke fear in others. Prohibited symbols that might cause a member of the public to feel offended are prohibited," end quote. And it's clear to see which direction this offence would be punished. I feel offended when men pretending to be women infiltrate mine and my daughter's spaces and services. Will my offence be recognised? And who decides what constitutes a hate symbol? Will it be illegal for me to wear my adult human female t-shirt outside? This is an absolute attack on free speech, an attempt to silence women who say, no, I will not accept any man as a woman, no matter how he identifies, and it is not my job to validate someone else's identity. They say, quote, "This government is committed to a Queensland that is harmonious, fair and inclusive, not one where individuals or groups are vilified based on their race, religion, language, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation or gender," end quote. Notice how the sex category is missing. Gender identity now trumps sex in Queensland. Sal Grover, a new mother, is facing a court case from a middle-aged man called Jason Roxy Tickle because he was rejected from joining her female app, Giggle. The Tickle versus Giggle case highlights the conflict between women's rights and gender identity, with implications far beyond the app. It could affect women-only spaces like prisons, toilets and sports in Australia and determine whether women and girls deserve to get access to these spaces away from men. The fact that a case has been filed against a woman for rejecting a man's request to join her female-only app is infuriating. Women and men across the world are supporting Sal as she battles to safeguard sex-based rights and the safety of all women and girls in this landmark case. The success of this case could lead to the removal of gender identity from the Sex Discrimination Act and defining women as adult human females in law. ensuring that female-only spaces, services and sports are exclusively for females and that nobody should be compelled to include men in these spaces. Now I organise regular Speakers Corner events with other women in Brisbane. I've met so many people doing this along the way who I'd probably never have met. Although I have lost friends over speaking out, what I've gained is far more. I've met women from all walks of life. We don't have to watch our speech or police our language around each other. We leave every other issue at the door. We are together and we are committed to fight for women's rights, child safeguarding and free speech for however long it takes. Our next Speakers Corner is in Parliament, outside Parliament in Brisbane on Sunday the 7th at 12:30, and I hope all of you come along. Thank you.